Hi, I'm Sean Larkin from PlanFirst Pinnacle Design. Welcome back to our live session this week. We're a company based in Auckland, specializing in architecture, interior, and landscaping design. Our topic for today is going to be, can you take one specific floor plan of a house and place it on any site? What are your restrictions? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? So in this image, you can see we've got an urban setting, we've got a hill, and we've got a beach setting. So we're going to do this in a mini series. So today we'll have a look at the basic challenges and opportunities of different sites, but just in broad principle. Then what we'll do going forward is each week we will look at a different site typology. So we'll have a look at urban, we'll have a look at coastal, hills, what else are we looking at? Suburban, and there's one other, we'll go through them. So each week going forward, we'll have a look at one topic so that we can spend more time on each one. Otherwise, we do tend to rush through it a little bit. So if we have a look at the big question is, can the same plan work on different sites? Now, a good plan the flow might work well, the rooms might be positioned well in relation to each other, it might suit the family, but the site is really going to determine whether that house plan will work on a particular site. It might work very well on a suburban site, but it might not work as well on a very steep, hilly site. Access is important as well. So one's got to suit the house design and the house plan to the site that it sits on as well. So the first thing that is very important is it's not just about the floor plan. It's about the orientation as well. So I do have instances where clients come to me and they've seen a floor plan online normally, and they absolutely love the floor plan and they want to use that as the basis for their house design. So the first thing I ask them is, have they already got a site? Sometimes the image that they've got will be, let's say, a south entry site, but the site that they've purchased is a north entry site. So immediately all your services and your entries are on the wrong side. So already there's a little bit of tweaking that's got to be done to the plan. But having a look at sun and orientation, if you're in the southern hemisphere, you want your house to face north, and vice versa. If you're in the northern hemisphere, you want your house to face south. Reason being, you want to maximize the amount of sunlight that comes into your house during the day. So as the example I used earlier, you could have the same with your living areas. They could just be facing the wrong way. They could be south-facing and you actually want them to be north-facing. So you might need to mirror the plan or rotate it. It's very seldom that you can take an existing floor plan that you've seen, put it on the site that you've bought, and nothing needs to be adjusted. That is more the exception than it is actually the rule. Secondly, the slope and the landform. Now, the shape of the land is extremely important. If you've got a house on one level, let's say the floor plan that you've seen is on one level, this might be your forever home and you don't want stairs. It's actually going to be the last home that you build and stairs are not for you. You shouldn't be looking at buying a sloped stand because it'll be very difficult to implement that. It'll be expensive as well to implement that floor plan on a sloped site. So it'll take also major earthworks, retaining walls, which are expensive, and expensive foundations. Another thing also with slopes is to note, where's your access road? is it at the top or is it at the bottom? So that'll determine, you know, where you're going to have your entrance to the house on the lower levels, and you need to work your way up, or if you can just drive in off the road straight into your garage and your front door and then work your way down. So that's an important consideration as well. Views and privacy. Now, views are a huge opportunity, but they do come with the challenge of your privacy. And obviously, the more expansive glass and the more open your house is, the more people can look into it. But I would rather have the view and sacrifice the privacy. There's other ways. You can put up screens. You can tint the glass, for instance. But I think if you're going to buy a property with a view, you should utilize that view to the nth degree, especially for your outdoor living areas, and how you know, how you live with that site. So privacy in an urban setting, you might find you've got more of a privacy issue because neighbours are normally close, especially if they've got double stories. Often you do find that they look into your living area or into your backyard. So one's got to look very carefully at how you screen those. Even if you're going to be screening with planting, that is also a great way to screen from neighbours. Looking at the next one, access and parking, also very important, not just for your own vehicles or your visitors' vehicles. Have a look again at how you live. Do you entertain a lot? I know in New Zealand there's a lot of on-street parking, but I always like to give on-site parking. And then again, that'll affect, the access will affect where your front door sits, whether it'll sit on the southern side or the northern side. I always say to clients, if you do have the option and you do live in the southern hemisphere, try and buy a south entry property. It makes the design easier and more practical if you don't have to use your sun orientation for garages. Access is also very important for construction. So if you've got a very narrow site, or if you've got a steep site or just difficult access, it makes the construction costs higher as well. So bear that in mind when looking at property before you actually buy it. There's a lot of considerations, I think, to take in. Then our next one is wind and the weather. All sites have got their own weather. Keep in mind, if you do have your living areas, your patio areas on the side that does tend to get the prevailing wind, if you don't have a choice, you might have a view on that side that you want to utilize. Just build some screens into the design so that you can use that space, and also make sure that it's covered. If you do live in an area that does tend to get rain, make sure you can use that seating space or that dining space if it is raining, or if it is windy, just make sure you've got something to close that area off with. Then next, very, very important, is planning rules. So you could have a beautiful plan that you've seen, and it's just a magnificent house, and that is what you want. But your site might be in an area where you've got quite strict council rules, and those would be things like your boundary setbacks, your recession planes, your coverage, your permissible heights. You could be in a flood zone that could affect where you can build as well, and your driveway requirements, of course. So you'll see in this image, for instance, the house is set back, and that could have been as a result of a council setback rule. A lot of that's got to do with just keeping a certain theme and feel in the specific neighborhood where you are building. And construction costs, of course, huge factor. If you're going to be building something like this, you can expect to have to reach quite deeply into your pockets, because there's a lot of engineering that goes into a design like this. So get it costed before you actually commit to the actual build. You can get a high level costing done once your concept design is in place. But just bear in mind that building something magnificent like this does come at a price. Then every site has got its own conditions, and what can affect the site is the orientation of the house. Now, often we see houses are built parallel to their boundaries. And this is something that I really don't like to see, because no thought has gone really into the orientation of the house. Rather turn the house on your site. There's many ways of doing it. If you do have a very small, narrow site, sure, you need to work with what you've got, but you could still orientate the end walls at an angle or the end windows at an angle to maximum the sun that does come in. You also want to stay away from western sun, because that is quite harsh and it does make your house very hot. The next thing is where your outdoor living should go. So you might have a property with a view, and the view might be orientated, let's say, to the south. So you don't have sun coming in on the southern side. Your sun, you live in the southern hemisphere, your sun comes from the north. So what you could do is definitely make use of that, that view, and have a patio on that side, or have large windows so that you can see the view. But then have, similarly on the other side, have a patio there as well, or large windows there as well, so that you do make use of the sunlight coming in. And then keep your service areas, like in this image, the kitchen is on the western side. You should try not have windows on the western side, just for what I mentioned earlier. Then have a look at how much privacy is needed. In this instance, the front door faces the street, so it would be the southern entry, let's say. But they do have some lounge or bedroom spaces on the southern side as well. So what they've done is they've put a high wall around it with some planting to soften it, and that just gives it a degree of privacy. They've also got their timber slats at the top, again, just for that extra privacy, so that, you know, it's not as easy to look into the space. So these are just all considerations that you should keep in mind. And then another thing to consider is, how easy is it to build that house? How much would you need to spend? You know, sometimes if one builds something like this on a slope like this, your foundations and your retaining walls sometimes cost more than your actual house, you know, the actual livable part of the house. So you could easily double your budget if you are building on a slope like this. So just bear that in mind before you commit to a project of this nature. Get it costed. That's my best advice I could give you. Then having a look at this, we have, this is built as sort of a rural setting. So keep in mind, getting materials to the site is going to be expensive. Most probably you would not have electricity. You would not have any council water, sewerage. So those things will all have to be done on site. You'd need septic tanks. You would need probably solar panels for electricity or gas. So these are also things to consider that'll add to the actual build cost. And then whether the plan needs small or major changes. You'll see in this instance, you've got a house that virtually takes up the entire width of the stand. So if you have a look at the fence on the left-hand side, you can't actually even walk between that wall and that fence. So this plan ideally could have been just, it's all right to have it on one side, but you need some access through to the other side if at all possible. Sometimes in very tight urban environments, you've got terraced housing, you can't have that. But in something like this, which is suburban, try and at least have access to your backyard through one of the sides. You don't want to be, every time you're doing landscaping in your backyard, that contractors have to walk through the house to get those plants and soils to the back. So that's something to keep in mind. So just five site typologies that we're going to have a quick look at today. We'll go into each one in more detail. Next week, we'll start with the urban site. And then we'll discuss one typology in detail from next week onwards for the next 5 weeks in a little mini series. So the biggest opportunity for an urban site would be that you can effectively use the space and you can create a very strong street presence because your house is not set back, it is on the road. So here you can see this house was built definitely after its neighbours, and it gives a really nice street appeal to the house. Not much privacy here, but that would be the owner's decision, how much privacy they want. The biggest challenge with an urban site is you normally do have your neighbours looking into your living space. And you also sometimes have to sacrifice natural light if your neighbours are very close to you, or if they, you might have a very tall building on your northern side that is blocking your natural light and your sunlight. So keep that in mind. The next one would be the mountain site or the sloping site. Now, definitely the biggest opportunity here is your view and your landscape that you can maximize to the fullest. Your challenge, on the other hand, is managing the slope, expensive foundations, expensive retaining walls, access to actually get the materials up to where you want to build. And the overall construction cost on a slope is definitely higher than if it was on a flat piece of ground. Thirdly, we'll have a look at the beach and coastal sites. Again, biggest opportunities is that strong indoor-outdoor connection and your magnificent sea view that you can have. Again, just a little bit on the challenge side. Besides just the privacy being an issue, you are very exposed to the elements. Often strong winds, salt exposure, so make sure the material selections you have can weather those strong salt exposures. You could have erosion because you're building on sand. So make sure your vegetation is planted so that it minimizes the erosion that you do have with the wind. And of course, there is the risk of flood. So just get an engineer to have a look at all these factors before you actually commit. So a lot more goes into a build than actually just the floor plan or the site for that matter. Rural and lifestyle sites are very, very popular currently. They offer a lot of space, a lot of privacy, flexibility of where you want to place the house, landscape, views, the list goes on. But the challenge here is providing services to that house. I mentioned it earlier as well. Access is difficult, normally long driveways, usually not council electricity, sewer or stormwater connected. So you would have to put that in at your own cost, those septic tanks and services that have to get designed specifically by an engineer as well. And then, of course, because you don't have neighbours close by, you would be more exposed to the elements. So wind, make sure you have shelters, even if it's in the form of landscaping. And then the last one, which most probably we're all familiar with, is your suburban flat site. The biggest opportunity is it's a straightforward construction and flexible family living. So fairly straightforward this. You would have all your council services that you would need. And the challenge, though, is getting your orientation right, privacy to the neighbours, and just designing it in such a way that you maintain as much privacy as possible. Not always easy, especially if you are living out onto your southern side, and that is where your road is. So not always easy to do, but definitely worth spending the time on the planning stage to make sure that you have access. Just something about this image that I'd like to comment on is you'll see that they've got quite a low wall in the front. Now, they could have extended that to increase their privacy. Two reasons for this. One could be, it could be in a neighbourhood where the council regulations specify that the front yard may only have a fence of a certain height. That is the one thing. The second thing is it's possible that they live across the road from the beach. So you would want that beach view. So each site is 100% independent. It's got its own merits, own opportunities and own challenges. Can the same plan work on different sites? Yes, it can, but not as a copy and paste solution. So each stand, one would have to look at the merits, see how you're going to adapt the floor plan that you do love. Normally it does get adapted for the better, by the way. And then a good plan can be used, but it must be adapted to suit the land, the climate, the views, the neighbours, the rules, and the way that people will live on that site. So that is just a brief overview of the different sites, the challenges and the opportunities. But next week, we will be looking specifically at how you design on an urban site. And that'll be part 2 of our little mini series for this topic. If any of you have got any questions or would like to get in touch with me, I will just and we'll see you all next week for the next topic. Thank you. Thank you for watching.